5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It is now 4 o'clock. It is now the time set for the regular board meeting of the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. We are back here in person in Sedona. It's great to see everyone in person. Before we begin, just a brief social distancing announcement. If everyone can keep their masks on while they're indoors and moving. Once you are at your seat and you're 6 feet apart, you're able to remove your mask. If I could ask that if everyone do that, that would be great. We can now start for the meeting call to order and roll call. So, Suke, if you have the roll call.
Sure. Brittany Buchanan.
Present.
Aaron Wonders.
Present.
David Nigro.
Present.
Dean Howard. Suke
Present.
Kneifel. Oh, there he is. Suke Kneifel, present. P.V. Jantz. Lynn Davison.
Present.
Mike Gordon.
Present.
And Linda Bove is excused for tonight.
All right, thank you. Second item on the agenda, 1.02, call to the public, call to the public on agendized items. Are there any members of the public who have submitted their forms? And seeing none, and we did not receive any via email. We did solicit public comment via email for this meeting. We did not receive any for this particular item 1.02. 1.03, information item, superintendent's report, Superintendent Reichman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first in-person meeting since March 2020. Really happy to see you here in person. So I want to welcome President Nigro, Assistant Superintendent Rex, and Assistant Superintendent Cooper, and those of you who are here from
with the IT department. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. I've got a couple of board members that are unable to log in to their board docs.
Okay. So that we're speaking about the remote board members?
Yes. Well, no, people who are at the meeting itself.
Okay. Is there an issue with board docs?
They're just not, whatever password they're using is not getting them in.
Okay. Do we have paper copies?
It's for Shayna Cooper and PV, I forgot his last name.
Sure.
We're okay now. This is Assistant Superintendent Cooper.
You're okay? Mm-hmm. PV, are you
okay? You guys are okay?
Yes.
Oh,
this is PV.
PV says that he's okay now. Okay, Superintendent.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Superintendent, you may proceed.
Bye-bye.
All right, are we all okay? Ready to proceed? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. We have a lot of information this afternoon to share with you all. So I'm just going to give a brief 30,000 aerial overview of what's happening in the agency, and then others from ASDB will be providing some additional information. But first of all, I want to start with the story. Just a few days ago, I watched one of our internal leaders sign a story about the American buffalo or bison. Awesome story, and something I didn't know before. As some of you may know, I'm originally from Nebraska. I grew up on the Western Plains, and we had cattle all around. like Wyoming, Colorado, western Nebraska, that area. So I knew about cattle, but what I didn't know is when we had the American buffalo 150 years ago, that they have very particular behaviors that are very different from cattle. So when you think about cows, what happens when they see a storm coming? If any of you have been on a ranch, you know that cows, they run away. They scatter all over the place, and they try to outrun that storm. But unfortunately, some of you may also know, cattle, they don't run very fast. They're pretty slow. So typically the storms will catch up to the cattle and cause all kinds of trouble for them. However, the American bison or buffalo, they don't do that. They behave very differently. The American bison, when they sense that there's a storm coming, what they do is they come together as a herd. They pack together, and then they turn and they face that storm, and then they start running. They don't run away, they run to the storm, and they go through the storm to the other side. Isn't that amazing? Wonderful story. And when you think about that, you know, us as people, typically when we see trouble coming, the storm coming, we too avoid and run away. And most of the time that's not successful. The storm overtakes us anyways, and we're stuck in it, and we're even more frustrated, experiencing even more pain. But if we, as people, can face this oncoming storm, if we can come together as a team, as a herd, and pack together and charge directly at the storm and get through it, then we will have spent a lot less time, effort, and energy, and less pain as well. I think that's just an awesome story, an awesome metaphor. And really, when I look at ASDB, at what we've accomplished in the last, I would say, year and a half, we have behaved more like the buffalo. We didn't see the storm coming. I don't think anyone else saw it either. But when the storm came upon us last year in March, we didn't fall apart. We didn't run away. We didn't scatter to the four directions. We actually came together as a team. We didn't open when we thought we would. We had to wait until October, which meant we had to provide remote education. And we did that. Our teachers did that. And when we came back in person in October, we followed the risk mitigation protocols that we had set up in place. And one evidence of our success is that in that 1 year and 3 months, we had 79 staff that reported COVID positive. 79. Most of them were Tucson and Phoenix campuses staff. But we only know of one on-campus transmission of the virus, one. So we've been very successful in keeping in place the risk mitigation strategies. So I'm really proud of us at ASDB as an agency that we were able to hold together and then continue to move forward. And then as you recall, in the middle of all of that, we had discussions and questions about the two campuses being in LEA, the Local Education Agency. In the spring, we had HB 2863 passed, giving us a provisional law, the session law that says for 1 year, the two campuses functions as an LEA, and ASDB and ADE, the Arizona Department of Education, would work together so that we can work through the different questions and issues and then bring back a proposed legislation to the next state legislative session in January 2022. And then you, the board, you didn't step back and say, oh, this is too crazy with COVID and everything else going on. No, you continue to work too. You develop the strategic plan and you finalize it at the last board meeting. Thank you so much, because you have now given us a very clear direction. You have given us priorities, focus areas, and you have made it possible for ASDB to become a data-driven organization. So I really, really appreciate the work that you put into the strategic plan. We are already beginning to collect data. We're getting ready to input some of that into the measures that we have in the strategic plan. So, in the last 18 months, we have charged right through the storm. And we're not done yet. We have the new school year. I mean, the pandemic is still there. We're having to revise our risk mitigation plan so that we address the new requirements from Governor Dutton, from other staff here. You will hear that our work tie in directly with the priorities in the strategic plan. So we're continuing to charge ahead into the future, into the heart of the storm. One final piece I just want to mention to you is that the strategic plan requires fiscal resources. We are internally doing a deep dive into our funding, our revenues, and our expenditures. We are starting to have some conversations about how do we meet the strategic plan and meet the needs of the agency with the resources that we have. And one thing that I want to share with you is that when you look at our budget, keep in mind that in our budget, about 82% of our expenditures is for personnel. That's salaries and wages, ERE, the health benefits that we provide, and other professional staff that we contract with to provide services for us. That's 82% of our total budget. Most organizations consider a healthy balance of expenditures, say that best practice is somewhere between 70 to 75% of the budget on staffing. So we're a little heavy on the staffing, and that has a direct impact on ASDB in ways that most of us never even think about. And what do I mean by that? Well, for example, we have aging buildings on the Tucson campus and the Phoenix campus. They're average about 45 years old. Typically, in a healthy organization and a healthy budget, we would have all along in the last 40 years have been severely underfunding the facilities, the maintenance of facilities for a very long time. We're now beginning to address to address that, we've set up a capital review committee. We developed a capital plan about 2 years ago. It's just in the beginning stages. We're talking about and looking to set up a contract to develop a master facility plan. But all of that requires resources. So there are some really significant discussions that we will have in the future. And at some point, those discussions will include you, ASDB board. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on that. So that concludes my report. We are the American bison. We are working together as a herd, and we're charging right through the storms that come our way. And I will take any questions, and thank you.
Are there any, thank you, Superintendent Reichman. Are there any questions for the superintendent on her report? No? Thank you. We're going to move on to 1.04, information item, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Rex.
Good afternoon, President Nigro and board members. My report that I submitted has a new exciting look that aligns itself to our pillars. You had an opportunity to see some of the work that we've been completing and starting, and it definitely is aligning to our ASDB strategic plan. In addition to the report that I submitted, I have the following information that to serve our families remotely, but have been adjusting their back in-person schedules as counties are opening up to serve families. This blended model of service will continue to ensure safety for our families as well as our staff. The ELP program will continue to develop a transition plan to incorporate itinerant preschool age students into their program in the future. The supervising teachers from both the statewide ELP and the itinerant regions are lending their expertise in working on this plan. Our new PDSD principal, Amber Akapnitis, and her team are ready to kick off the school year. And PDSD has a theme. The theme this year is Rise and Shine. She also hosted town halls for staff and students to connect, meet, and talk with her this summer to learn a little bit more about her and her role in the principal position, as well as her goals for the school year. With her moving into the principal position, that opened a position up, and she has hired Trisha Waddell. Trisha comes to us from Colorado, and she brings a lot of new skills and ideas, and we hope that we'll be able to have some time where you can get to know Trisha a little better. She will be supported by Jill Voigt, who has been working as assistant principal and has developed a lot of great systems, and she will be mentoring and supporting Trisha as she comes on board. Kelly Creasy, Flint Fears, and the ASDB team are back on campus preparing for our dorm as well as our day students to arrive. The 2021 Tucson campus back to school theme, Field of Dreams, If We Build It, Region 2 will be led by Rosie Hicks, who joined us in April of this year. This will be her first full year in the position, and we welcome her skills and talents to the team. Region 3 in the South will actually be led by Jay. Lisa Jackson may be asked to support the agency with some of her institutional knowledge and assist with some ongoing programs and assessments that we are working on. But their retirement provided us an opportunity. It provided us the opportunity to look at the duties that both positions held, as well as the needs of ASDB. And with the help of HR, both jobs were then repurposed into positions. I'd like to introduce Robin Eichner and Kalea Cook to the ODD team. Both began on July 1 as internal hires, and we're very fortunate to have ASDB veterans on the ODD team. Their experience and expertise will continue to serve as valuable assets. Robin Eichner will be the new assessment coordinator. This position assumes many of the key duties from Lisa, but also Dan's position. Her primary duties will include district administrators support them. I also wanted to give you an update on our student information system. The ODD is currently in the RFP process to see if the current student information system is the best product to track ASDB data as we move forward with our strategic plan and the need for data tracking. The RFP process should be completed by the end of August. All principals and directors met last week to develop their personalized SMART goals. I began by sharing my SMART goals with them, and we've all been given the task of including as one of our SMART goals direct alignment with the ASDB strategic plan. Much of the work we do aligns with Pillar 2, but as we began to discuss and learn more, we found that the other pillars fit nicely into the programming and the processes that we are developing. We will meet monthly to discuss, share, and align the strategic plan. We decided that there's a lot in our strategic plan, and this will.
Are there any questions for Dr. Rex? No, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Rex, for your report. I did want to thank the staff and the agency for keeping everyone safe during the height of COVID. As Superintendent Reichman had mentioned, we had one on-campus transmission. So I'm happy that students are able to come to school and staff are able to come to work and be very safe in that regard. I think that's really important that we and that it wasn't because the superintendent said this is our policy and that's it. That's because everyone lived it every day, the staff, the students, and the parents. So thank you to the community for that. I think it's been very effective, and I'm hoping that we can continue.
Culture, and Pillar 4, effective resource management. As Superintendent Reichman mentioned, I am working with the leadership team to perform an in-depth review of our fiscal resources, and as it pertains to the day-to-day responsibilities, the IT department continuously makes sure that our technology infrastructure is appropriately maintained, and that's being led by Paul Creasy. As noted in my report, the operations department, led by Albert Duff, specifically our food services unit, has been very busy assessing the efficiency of the food services operations, and in a few minutes you'll hear more about that from Albert under agenda item 5.01. The business services department, through some vacancies, are still working on our day-to-day fiscal year-end close, working on building the budget for the new fiscal year, wrapping up 2022 budget, but also beginning to work on the 2023 budget, which is due to the state on or before September 1st. The business
approval of the consent agenda, consistent with board policy, to include items 3.01, 6.01, 6.02, 7.04, and 7.05. Is there any board member that would like to discuss what's on the consent agenda item or on the consent agenda, or would like to pull one or more items from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, would anyone like to move to approve the consent agenda?
I move to accept consent agenda items or approve consent agenda items. I need to go back to it.
This is Lynn.
Go ahead, Lynn.
I second.
Okay, I was just going to read out the numbers, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, Lynn. So Lynn is seconded, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All in favor?
In case they need us, and some join because they have a specific student in mind that may need us. So this is just 5 people that want to be a part of our ASDB itinerant program.
Okay, I move that we approve the contracts as set forth in the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, the motion carries. We're now on to 4.01 information item finance report. Assistant Superintendent Cooper.
Good afternoon. As you all are aware, I am wearing 2 hats right now since the Director of Business Services position became vacant July 1st and still has not yet been filled. Thankfully, we were able to complete interviews on Tuesday, and I do believe we have possibly identified a candidate. I will be reaching out to the candidate sometime tomorrow. And we'll be presenting that to the board for approval at the September 9th board meeting. The team has been working on preparing for the fiscal year-end close of the transactions for 2021, since that did close on June 30. We're also working with the state to close the fiscal year. As such, the budget fiscal year 2021 reports as of June 30th will be presented to the board at the September 9th meeting, as the fiscal year has not yet been closed due to the transactions still being processed. Last month, ADE tentatively awarded ASDB over $870,000 in funding from the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. The funds can be used through September 30, 2024, and we're currently putting together plans for student support and other appropriate uses of those funds. The ESSER 3 monies do require 20% of the expenditures to be used for learning recovery, so we will be folding that into the budget plan as well. The proposed 2022 budget has been presented in the report and is based on initial appropriations and what we expect to collect in revenues resulting from our initial budget projections. Positions, we do have approximately 99 vacant positions, which consist of the teachers, instructional and residential service assistants, interpreters, bus drivers, and other various positions. On the bottom of page 3 begins the financial summary, where we begin to compare May 31, 2021 information to May 31, 2020. The budget fiscal year 2021 collected revenues of $30.2 million was about $769,000 lower compared to last year's expenditures of $31 million, and that's primarily due to the decline in what we were able to spend in our federal and state grants, Medicaid, rental and gift donations. Total obligated expenditures of $52.3 million are higher by about $923,000 when we compare that to last year's amount of 67% of our expenditures providing instruction and student support, and 12% in agency administration. The remaining 21% of our expenditures are in the areas of transportation, operations, food services, and our 2 statewide service programs for the deaf and blind programs. On page 10 of the report, through May 31st, 2021, we are showing a surplus of about $2.1 million when you compare actual revenues of $51.3 to actual expenditures of $49.2 million. Based on initial projections for fiscal year-end close, I am projecting about a $2.5 million surplus once we close the fiscal year. So that has been consistent with the last 3 years where we have been ending the year with a surplus. Based on the review of the financial data, there are no immediate concerns.
Process reviewed multiple companies and awarded the contract to K-12 by Elior. K-12 was awarded the contract based on their ability to provide services, their company history, as well as cost of the contract. K-12 currently provides services to many Arizona districts, including Benson, Tucson, Tombstone, and Thatcher Unified School Districts. K-12 also provides services for the Mississippi School for the Deaf and Blind. I have invited K-12 to present about their services today and how they plan to provide a great meal for every student. Please allow me to introduce Amy Gibbons from K-12. Also, due to presentation limitations, you'll be able to see her presentation on board docs as you scroll through. She'll make note as she goes from one slide to the next.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Model, and we really do try to make sure that every student we serve is given a great meal. Next. Our agenda this evening is just a quick introduction of our company, how we're going to align with the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, and our responsive partnership plan. Next. K-12 by Elior is a chef-centric, food-focused company. We are 12 distinct hospitality companies that are united by our passion for food, service, and excellence. We now are umbrellaed under the name of K-12 by Elior. You might know us in the field by Summit or Aviance or perhaps Lancer or Aladdin. Next. Collectively, we service more than 2,000 schools in over 500 districts across the United States. And annually, we prepare over 150 with specialized training for our staff to allow effective support for your students and staff, with special menus and service line identifiers in Braille, digital menu boards, technology resources, real-time communication access, translation apps, Braille identifiers, and QR reader codes for your students and staff. Our menu software website, NutriSlice, has a text-to-speech option. We also will have a certified dietary manager to support all of the special dietary needs of your students. We will offer guest chef exhibition cooking and sampling programs. We plan on increasing food quality and adding more variety for your students and staff, and we will have an annual student survey as well as probably monthly student survey with staff and students. We will customize your menus based on student needs and local preferences. We have a catalog of over 3,000 recipes, and 75% of our menus are scratch made. Next. On this slide, you will see an example of what the cafeterias will look like once all the marketing has been installed. We will utilize our Roots marketing campaign. Next. And through our Try It Tuesdays, Global Bites, and additional marketing, we plan on being able to engage your students. We have Try It Tuesday, pick 3 for any students that perhaps bring lunches or breakfast from home. We plan on
Mary Council that meets quarterly and has discussions. What does that entail? Who is part of those discussions?
Sure. We partner with the principals at each school to choose who would be on that council. What we will do during that time is offer samples of new menu items, allow students and staff to have feedback on what they would like on our menus, as well as nutrition topics that they would like to see.
Thank you. My second question, I noticed that you mentioned an annual survey for our students. Is that set in stone as an annual basis? Or is that up to discussion to do something more on a quarterly basis, a quarterly survey to review with students that then could be addressed in tandem with those culinary council meetings? Is that something that's potential?
Absolutely. So our annual student survey is something students will pull that item and replace it with something they do like. We also talk to students when they're in the cafeteria every day, and we also look inside garbage cans to see what students are eating and what they're throwing out. So we can change those menus.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Also, just to make sure that we had considerations for our VI students as well as our blind students, we've also made sure that all the VI students and blind have hard trays, hard silverware in order to work with that. We're also looking at the menu to make sure that our VI students' considerations and special needs are also addressed within the menu. And lastly, with K-12, because they have such large resources, the special meals are also a high priority, and those are the special dietary restrictions on our students, so we're ensuring that every student receives not only a great meal, but a safe meal.
Okay.
The first option was to look at vacancies in ASDB and to do internal transfers. Some of our food service employees selected that option. The second option is to transfer to the new food service company to apply and interview and see if there are opportunities there with K-12. And the third option is to apply elsewhere. Our human resources have been actively working with all 10 to help them and smooth over the transition to whatever is next in their lives. We have been successful with 7, but we do have 3 left that we need to do the reduction in force. In doing that, then these 3 individuals become eligible for unemployment insurance. So back to you, President Nigro.
Okay.
Team has done their best to help people smooth the transition for their life. Not everyone is going to be happy about these changes, but I do think that it has been important for us to show that we are making an effort to make this change as smooth as possible. And with that, making that smooth transition, I think, has happened with most of these employees. And as a last resort, if we have to do the reduction in force, that was our last option. So I do want to commend your work that you and your team have been doing thus far. I am supportive of this reduction in force, so I would like to make the motion to approve the recommendation from Superintendent Reichman for a reduction in force.
Okay, thank you, PV. Are there any seconds to that motion?
This is Suke. I second that.
Possible candidates to be an ombuds person, and you chose Karen Grandin. So Karen Grandin worked with ASDB since 2018, about 3.5 years, as our ombuds person. And the one thing that I wanted to point out to you is that in 2017, 2018, we did things backwards. You made the selection, presented me with the selection, and then when I checked with our Arizona procurement rules, rather than working for you as the board of directors. So this time, I decided let's try to do it through the Arizona procurement system to figure out how to do that. Our procurement specialist, Lou Estrada, did some research and she found an Ombudsperson International Association that's already a vendor in the Arizona procurement system. And the Ombudsman International Association, I guess, has a list of members that anyone could submit their letter and resume to us as a potential contracted vendor. We posted and announced a good match for ASDB in terms of working with you, the board, and working with the agency, that we can go back to how we set it up with Karen Grandin and do it again that way. It worked with Karen Grandin. Or, I mean, what are what are our options? What can we do? What's your suggestions? What do you want me to do? And that's why this is on the agenda, and said possible action, because I wasn't sure you would be prepared to take formal action. So if you just want to have this conversation and provide me with feedback, or think about it and put it on the agenda for the next board meeting, we can do that. It's just putting it on the table here. Know that 2, maybe 3 times in the 5 years I've been here, we've had the state ombudsman office contact us with a complaint, and then we would respond to them and to that complaint. So that's happened a handful of times. Do we set up a more formal arrangement? That's a good question, and we can explore that.
The other idea that sort of has popped up in regards, just from the standpoint of when we have a client complain, and it can go all the way up to fair hearing through the AG's office. And under the AG's office, a lot of times they kick us back to formal mediation with that client. And those mediators work out of the AG's office, and then we pay.
And maybe take another look at the ombudsman and the role. I personally think what was just explained is really good, because it has a familiarity with Arizona, with how things work at the legislature, with ASDB, with our community. So I think we should take a step back and see, just like what was explained, but at the same time, maybe there's some thought process of maybe expanding the role of the ombudsman, in the sense that says, you know, they shouldn't be within the agency, they should be, you know, a pure, true ombudsman. And what kind of does that look like? Are there outside organizations that may be able to fit that bill for us? And I say that in the sense that the legislature...
You know, historically, the ombudsperson has not had much interaction with the legislature. Is there, do you envision an expanded role for the ombudsperson that would involve interaction with the legislature?
I think it's just something that has just been over the years. I've just seen that issue kind of grow, and you know, it's an issue. I think just that might be a potential. I might be completely off base in that mindset, but it's just something that keeps coming back to me, that the agency has a good job of, you know, going to the legislature and having those conversations. Superintendent Reichman does it a great deal, but maybe there's a role on the ombudsman side that kind of sees it from all angles, because I think sometimes it just depends on the political wind, if you will, of the legislature, what could be happening to ASDB, short-term and long-term.
At the same time, we need to make sure that the board understands the superintendent's intention here. There are multiple factors that need to be considered when we are bringing on an ombudsperson. If we are bringing in someone outside, how could we possibly consider their outside interest potentially influencing the board, and whether that would be a benefit to the agency or potentially a benefit to the students or not? My biggest hesitation is that if we were to engage an outside ombudsperson, if, for example, through an agency or through the procurement process, however the case may be, that person will likely not be familiar with deaf, blind, visually impaired individuals, and may make recommendations that might put national level perhaps. Another possibility is to approach agencies that have a similar population and view of services who perhaps need an ombudsman as well, and we could discuss a cost-sharing agreement. So for example, we could consider ACDHH. They may need someone to perform similar services. Perhaps the Governor's Council, They may need an individual who is sensitive to the disability community. So there may be opportunity to engage in a partnership and again, protect the agency's mission.
Thank you, PV. Mike, I believe you wanted the floor.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. If there's been a job announcement or a job description that was circulated, I apologize, but I didn't see it. So I was hoping that maybe that could be distributed to the members.
Reichman has several possible avenues to take to approach this situation, and she's asking the board what we would like in terms of how she proceeds. So that's my understanding, is that now we have an opportunity to talk about that process and figure out what avenue to pursue and potentially look into additional options that we haven't considered yet. Some of the concerns that have been shared is that if we have a job posting, as you mentioned, would that individual be working for the superintendent or for the board? Do we need to consider a separate or outside position or contract who would report directly to the board rather than to the superintendent? Could we work with another agency to partner? Could we look through for a procurement contract that already exists in the system? Of course, taking the risk that that individual may not know anything about our population that we serve. So my understanding is that's the intent of this conversation.
To facilitate those. So those are just some thoughts on my end.
Thank you. PV?
This is PV Jantz. I have a question for you. What does your ombudsman structure look like in the Arizona Department of Education?
Well, so it's a wide agency, so it's hard to nail down a specific. I think there's multiple intake.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Wonders. If you could speak into the microphone a little bit better. Thank you.
Sorry, got off track. So within the Department of Education, it varies between program area, I think in some part depending on the customer service facing front. Obviously, there's more intake points for that. We have various functions, so we have dispute resolution services. I think it probably varies significantly depending on the size of the district. I think the larger districts have a much more sophisticated process and probably a more broad spanning process for that. But I can't really speak to specifics about any individual district.
And this is PV again. And why I'm asking these questions, I think that might be where the board could start looking at what Superintendent Reichman needs. We may be able to model what we do based on another school district. Of course, ASDB as a school for the deaf is a unique agency and in a somewhat odd position, teetering on the brink of a state agency and also a
Staff to kind of fit their issue within one of those 9 or 10 different avenues. And sometimes depending on the issue, it may have overlapped between two of them. And it was, we got things that were, kind of filed in the wrong place, so to speak, and we had to change that. We had, issues of staff, not being afraid to kind of come forward, for fear of, some sort of retaliation, which of course we would never do. But if they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel comfortable, but we still want to hear the feedback. So, we still want to get any kind of issues dealt with and raise them in a way that we can manage them. So what we did from the policy level is we consolidated those 9 or 10 to, I think, 4 primary avenues, and we organized them shown otherwise. So what the ombudsperson does is kind of figures out what the real issue is and then guides that person to the appropriate avenue for, vindicating their complaint or their grievance. Again, it depends on the subject matter. And then the ombudsperson would give us a report of her work. And there wasn't, in terms of the cost, this is not a full-time position. I think we spent about $7,000 per year in the last 4 years on the previous ombudsperson. So it was not, it's not a full-time position by any means, although that depends on a low, caseload, of course, and that's why the contractor avenue looks more attractive to us. In terms of being, separate, yes, Karen Grandin was an employee, but we, so that is a fact. But she operated independently. So, that specialized experience was important to us. Our old ombudsperson had that experience. I'm not sure about this one, or the one, the resume that came across here. But that is something that we really need to look at. So from my perspective, I'm not certain that the resume we got is going to be, accurate. I mean, there's certainly a possibility, or going to be a good fit for us. There's certainly a possibility to enter into a contract and then move away from that contract if it's not working for us, or to get someone in the interim while, for the next 3 months or 4 months while we transition to someone else. I think that would likely be okay. At the same time, sharing, as Suke had mentioned, with another agency might be helpful. That person would have a knowledge of Arizona, a knowledge of state policies, and they'd be local. They wouldn't, be doing everything. Our policy can change. We didn't have one. We didn't have one of these policies 4 years ago. We created it. We met with some committees. We met with some of the community, and we crafted these policies. We can always change them if there's a desire to do so. But to have an ombudsperson that continues on, in the role that we've had it, that's to me that's really what we're looking at. Unless there is some desire to change those policies or to look into them more in depth. PV?
Thank you, President Nigro. This is PV Jans. I'm considering two things. I think it's necessary for the board to considerations will arise. So we need to make sure that we, of course, consider our recent strategic plan regarding communication and relationship. I believe it falls under that pillar. And it also could align with effective resource management. As complaints arise, an ombudsperson being involved could have a long-term impact or result on the agency. So it's important that we have the right person who has the correct information to make the decisions that will benefit the agency in the long term.
Thank you, PV. That does raise the question of if we do enter into a contract with the vendor that has submitted their RFP. Ms. Cooper, do we have a right of unilateral termination in that contract, or are we committed for a year or for 6 months or for some period of time, and we can only terminate for cause?
It is my understanding that we can do the unilateral.
I'm sorry?
It is my understanding we can do the unilateral, but I will confirm with the procurement manager.
Okay, great. So in other words, if we were in a full-time position, at all, it's much more limited than that historically. And I guess, in terms of if we were to hire the person that responded to the RFP temporarily, I don't know that she necessarily has the experience working with deaf individuals and blind individuals. That, I think, was one part that, might have been a bit lacking. So I know I'm not necessarily enthusiastic about that, but I do understand that we need an ombudsperson. We've been without them for a few months. We're likely looking into September before we make another decision at the earliest. So that's something for the board to consider. Do we want to extend another few months without one, or do we want to try to have this one until we agree to a more permanent, more sustainable solution? PV?
This is PV Jan. Perhaps because this is coming to the board and we have a very short time until school's information.
Okay, are there other comments on this matter from the other board members? Unlike in Zoom, I can't tell if the people attending remotely are raising their hands or turning on their cameras. I I don't have any visual indication. I just have the audio indication. So to the extent that you'd like to speak, just go ahead and speak up.
This is Suke. Kind of to piggyback what PV was saying, I was wondering if we would need to make a motion tonight to authorize the leadership team to move forward in that direction for an interim, for interim coverage of the ombudsman position until we have a chance as a board to develop that more fully.
That's a great comment. I think what we could do is have a motion where we would allow the superintendent to, we would allow her at her option to enter into the contract with the RFP, provided that there is a unilateral right to termination, that we have a unilateral right to termination, and that, I'm trying to think of other terms that we might need, but I think that's it. As long as we had that unilateral right to termination and more sustainable selection or a more permanent selection, the agency can do that, but we don't necessarily need a board motion or act to do that.
So I'm not sure how to state it, but I would like to move that we allow Annette and the leadership team to move forward with an interim contract with the person that we have through the Office of Procurement, with the limitations that they understand this would be a fee for service for the number of hours used for a intermittent period of time until this position can be developed more fully.
Great. At the superintendent's discretion.
At the superintendent's discretion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I would second that motion.
From my perspective, I do have concerns over somebody that is completely out of state, that is not going to be in state, coming into our school and our districts and kind of just like going through our stuff. I mean, I guess the files and data would be relevant to their job position, but I guess I would personally feel more comfortable if this person was much more local than all the way across the United States.
Can I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I'm not suggesting this as a long-term. I'm suggesting in the case of a complaint coming up until we are able to define this position and fill that need internally, whether it's internal to ASDB, but internal to Arizona. I think PV's comment of needing to have that backup plan in case there is a complaint before that is developed, we should be prepared for that eventuality.
Who is currently handling complaints if there is one?
Or that I'm uncomfortable giving to my teacher if they're a student. They don't, without fear of that, the ombudsperson saying, hey, this, I have this information and, there's some level of confidentiality there. That's what we have interrupted. So in terms of the complaints or grievances, that all is still fully functioning. We just don't have the ombudsperson, and we haven't since the resignation several months ago.
Okay, thank you.
PV has a comment. And this is PV Jantz again. I would like to recognize your comment, Brittany. That is certainly valid, and I share your concern. The issue that we're addressing right now is, again, we do not have that centralized person who can handle things if they escalate to a certain level. We don't, and I think that if the board were to allow the leadership team and Superintendent Reichman to use their executive decision-making to figure out how to proceed in that temporary contract, that gives the board and the agency some kind of protection, at the same time giving us the flexibility to ensure that we are on the right track and we remain on the right track in the long term. If that person does violate confidentiality in or violates any aspect of the contract, they don't have to deal with just us. They have to then deal with the state of Arizona. And that is something that no one in the state takes lightly. So that should hopefully alleviate some of your anxieties.
Thank you.
And from my perspective, in terms of the person being in Virginia, I have not read the state procurement contract because it is very long and complex. But and Ms. Cooper, I would think that we have that the vendor would be submitting to personal jurisdiction and venue in the state of Arizona, meaning that it would not be difficult for us to kind of drag her into court if we needed to. Not that I expect that we would. Motion that is on the floor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Superintendent Reichman, I think you have the direction from the board that you need and that you've asked for in this item, and we look forward to revisiting this in the next board meeting. Next item is 702, information and discussion item, legislative update. Maria Murphy.
Good evening, Board President Nigro, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendents Cooper and Rex. For the record, my name is Maria Murphy. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Relations for ASDB. I'm going to impose upon you for about 10 or 15 seconds to just make a personal digression and just say what a pleasure and how happy I am to be here and see all of you in person. It's been about 14, 15 months since I've seen you. And except for the financial aspects, which all of those became effective as of the start of the new fiscal year, July 1st. The budget went ahead and passed on June 30th, so we got it basically done as close to the deadline as we possibly could. And we have spent the last few weeks just trying to tease out exactly what was included in the budgets this year. So what I can tell the board is $150,000 was included specifically for ASDB for an update of the classroom notification systems in Tucson. And we did receive some additional funding in inflation for the baseline for students. Because 2863 included session law language, ADE and ASDB made a joint committee and have started working on what does LEA implementation start to look like for ASDB over the next year. We met and had an introductory meeting on June 22nd. We had our second etc. So we had a whole 3 weeks of vacation, and as of yesterday, we're back in the saddle again, preparing for the next legislative session. One item that I would like to note is because the budget bills were signed so late into the fiscal year this year, I was able to alert the executive/operations team about the possibility, however remote, that we could be potentially looking at a partial government shutdown if the bills were not passed by midnight on June 30th. So Superintendent Reichman took the bull by the horns and got the entire group together, and we started contingency planning for what does it look like on July 1st if there is a partial or total government shutdown. So the entire team pulled together, was able to come up with a draft contingency plan. So we are still in the process of finalizing that plan. So Ms. Cooper, would you like to take that? Because we were aware of that ahead of time.
Yes, it will have no impact. It will just mean that we will have to inform OSPB and JLBC anytime we plan to use more than the appropriated revenues within the Cooperative Services Fund. We would have to make sure that we have excess cash to spend anything over and above beyond. So now we will have 3 appropriated funds, one being the general fund, the second being the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind Fund, the third being the Regional Cooperative Services Fund. The primary reason for them separating out the Regional Cooperative Services Fund was because it made up a substantial amount of our other services that we have, or our other funds, and so that was the primary reason to separate that out. But it has no impact in terms of budget. We project the budget based on enrollment for those students within the Cooperative Services Fund, as well as expected fee for service and vouchers.
And as just a follow-up question to that, is there consistency in growth year to year in those funds, I guess? So for establishing a projection for a needed appropriation, it's fairly consistent. It's not wildly.
Yes.
Dropped off, and maybe no one did, but I thought I'd make that clear. It's because I don't have Zoom and I can't note it myself. The next item is 703, information discussion item, introduction and possible discussion of policies GCKA, IKFB, EEBE, and discussion on policy BBBD. Maria Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Board President Nigro. So you have before you the red line policies GCKA, IKAFB, and EEEB for discussion. They were presented to the public. I have not received, I have not received any public comment regarding them, but at this time I would like to make myself available for any questions.
Okay. I would like to note the BBBD discussion, and I just wanted to bring this up to the board for discussion as we transition back to, primarily in-person meetings. Historically, we would have all of our meetings in person, and we'd have a phone line for board members that weren't able to make it for one reason or another. They'd be able to participate telephonically, just like as they are doing today. We wouldn't be able to see them. We didn't have Zoom at that time. Board members, we can miss meetings if needed. If that has to be, we can use the technology, whether it's Zoom or the telephonic line. If for some reason we have to, there's no problem with that. I don't want there to be any barrier to attending a meeting. Certainly if it's just location, I don't want there to be any barrier to be able to attend and participate effectively. But if the board wanted to discuss, and I think the reason we have this here is if the board wants to discuss amending the policies to set an expectation as to what percentage of in-person attendance the board members would have versus attendance via other means. Right now, there isn't, our attendance policy is essentially if you miss 2 meetings in a row, you get a talking to by me. But fortunately, I haven't had to do that. I don't believe that my predecessors have had to do that in the nearly 6 years I've been on the board. But although you can get around that by missing every other meeting, so maybe that's not a great item either. But from my perspective, is the board interested in having a policy that says maybe 50% of the meetings that you attend would be in person in a given year or in a given calendar year, and then the others can be attended electronically, or maybe you don't want to update the policy and we'll have it as is. I just want to get a better idea from the board, what their expectations are, so that we can get on the same page in terms of in-person attendance and attendance via technology. PV.
Thank you, President Nigro. I'm sure everyone is waiting with bated breath. What's PV going to say? And I'm not here to disappoint you. I do have a question. My interest is about board member attendance. Is 50% typical? What is average? Is there some sort of standard? What is this 50% attendance?
I meant if we were to change the policy to say 50% are attended in person, and then the remainder could be attended via technology. So not that the expectation is that a board member is here half the time. It's the expectation potentially that there's some percentage of in-person attendance that would be expected.
And storms can often come unexpectedly, or if there's limited transportation and they're unable to arrive at a location that we've decided, as long as we have some sort of clause that leaves it up to the president's discretion to waive that 50% requirement. I do think that 50% requirement would be a good idea with that clause to waive it at the president's discretion.
PV, I hate to interrupt for a moment. I understand that I have been remiss in failing to take a break at the 90-minute mark, so I apologize for that. The staff does need a break. I think we typically break every 90 minutes. So PV, if you could hold your thought for a moment while we take a short 10-minute break. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Everyone is outside.
Everyone's outside? Okay. Yeah, so then we're okay then to come back. Oh, okay. That was loud.
I've had like big old dark circles. I love raccoons though. That's the only thing I got going for me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that break. We were resuming our meeting on, we left off on 7.03, information and discussion item. Ms. Murphy, if you can return in case there are any questions. I know PV was in the middle of a statement on which I unfortunately had to interrupt him. But you can continue.
Thank you, President Nigro. Appreciate that, and thank you for the interruption. I think a break was necessary and beneficial for all of us. I also want to recognize that 50% in-person attendance, I think, is a good idea, with the potential for having some sort of clause that 50% requirement could be waived at the president's discretion. That way, if an emergency were to arise, you have the ability to use your discretion in those special circumstances. Another question, though, as representatives of the community, people who work within and serve with these populations and represent these populations, I think it is also important that we include some sort of percentage for being part of the meeting. Regardless of whether that's in person or remote, I think we need some sort of minimum attendance.
Okay, thank you, PV. Other thoughts on the attendance policy?
Yeah, I would just agree with what PV was saying. I think it would be wise to also have a contingency baked in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would like to board.
Right. And Zuke right now, our BBBD says that after 2 consecutive missed meetings, the board president is going to send a letter to the board member that missed the 2 consecutive meetings. If there are 3 consecutive meetings that are missed, then the president has to meet with or write to the board member to determine whether or not resignation is in order and to report to the full ASD board on this communication. Fortunately, that I haven't had to do that again. I don't think the predecessors that have served with me with me have had to do that. So it hasn't been an issue for us. So I'm less concerned about the overall attendance policy because I think we generally have good attendance. And again, the board member is going to miss a meeting or 2. Over the course of their 3-year term. I mean, that's part of life. But in what I'm more concerned about is that we have an expectation that if we have an in-person meeting, that we don't just have one person, that we have as many people in person as we can, and then if technology is used to kind of allow board members to still participate, even if they may have other obligations, professional obligations, they may have travel obligations, et cetera. So it looks like what I'm hearing is if we can have a policy that, our expectation is that we're at least half the meetings we're going to attend in person. And it could be an expectation. It doesn't have to be, you get a nasty letter. Then I think that would be good. All right. Does that sound good, Ms. Murphy?
It does. Would you like me to include the language that in person could be at the discretion of the board president?
Yeah, I mean, if we use the word expectation, it's not a shall or a must. It's not a word or terms of requirement. We could make it requirement and then say exempted at the discretion of the. I mean, I don't know if it has to be the board president, but maybe that's the right way to go. If we do use that, if we do make it a must or a shall. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I'll have it ready for the September board meeting.
For September,
Thank
perfect.
you.
And that'll be first read in September, and then it can enter the next time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, our next item is 705, information and possible action item, board work study on August 12th, 2021, the date for the poll results. On that one, that was the date that the poll said we should have our meeting. So I would like to move that we have our meeting on August 12th. And again, this is the work study session.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Okay. Any opposed?
David, is that an in-person meeting?
Yes, that is in person, work study session, so not as formalized as our regular board meetings. There will be it's in person, but there will be a telephonic option. It won't, if you can't join in person, you won't be excluded from it.
Okay. Well, when you're talking about electronic, we just voted on this, but nonetheless, we're talking about still having a possibility of a Zoom option as just compared to telephonic, though, right?
Yeah, I think I prefer that we have some kind of video component to it, especially because you can get that visual information for those that need it, and it helps everyone really, as opposed to just on the phone.
Okay.
And it's quite frankly, it's better for me too, because I can't see who else is on the line and what they're doing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that motion has passed. So August 12th will be our meeting. It'll be in person. There will be that technological component to it. That's the more informal work study session meeting on the DLEA issue that we talked about at the last meeting. Next is 801, call to the public for non-agendized items. And we, again, in this meeting we had a hybrid approach or a combined approach. We solicited emails, and then also there could be any members of the public that are in attendance can fill out their form and indicate that they would like to speak. I don't believe that we've gotten any of those forms on this matter for any member of the public that is here. We do have an email that was timely received, and I'd ask Sue Kay to read it.
Thank you. It is an anonymous email from concerned ASDB parent, and the subject is just concerns, and the email is as follows. As a parent to a student, I am concerned about the state of affairs at our schools and believe it is crucial that the board addresses these concerns. 1, merit pay. What merit pay standardized increases are in place for staff and faculty? Based on performance and cost of inflation, how do we keep and then reward our best performers? Are there yearly reviews to maintain staff with good performance and measures to reduce those who do not meet department expectations year after year? What procedures are in place to bring those not performing well to the standards of other individuals? What is the time limit to bring these individuals up to those standards? Number 2, Annette Reichman. Within her 5-year tenure, what genuine accomplishments have been made beyond a 5-year observation of bamboo grassland? A farmer does not plant one seed only and watch it grow, but tends to the rest of the crops and gardens. Number 3, Nancy Alexander. Why does the school pay for someone without quantifiable data of accomplishments? As a contracted consultant with the responsibility of a strategic plan, where is her strategic plan we have paid to have? Is it the standard for any organization to take 2 years to prepare a plan without execution? What controls does this consultant really have? Why does her LinkedIn account state she is an ASDB superintendent search facilitator? Isn't that complete? Is she the person who runs the agency and Annette is the token face for ASDB? Number 4, Kelly Creasy. As a principal of the Tucson school, why does it appear as though she is uninterested in pushing to make her school the hub it has been for the deaf and blind communities in the past? As principal, why does she not know ASL, the community language she serves? ASL is the 3rd most commonly used language in the U.S., so why wouldn't she know the ASL as the leader of the deaf school? Why does it appear as though her campus has its own agenda, to protect itself and not move with advancements in greater learning while keeping complacency and mediocrity as the standards for its mission? Is HR a part of the problem for not finding a suitable person to run a school with some of the lowest scholastic numbers in the state? How do those scores compare nationally with the same school setup? Number 5, Lisa Yancarelli. As leader of blind programs, why does she not have successful programs in place like the deaf programs, like Camp Leap and the Deaf Mentor program? What is her plan for our blind students' success? Other parents have complained on the lack of blind student support. Isn't that the main purpose of her position? Is her position a necessity, or is she not qualified for the position? Thank you for making this public platform available for submissions, as I am not able to attend the meetings. I will do more submissions for subsequent meetings on where I believe the board should turn their attention.
Thank you, Suki. 802, discussion and possible action item, agenda items for next regular board meeting scheduled for September 29th, 2021 in person in Tucson. Before I open it up to others, I wanted the board to, as you probably noted, we're linking the things that we're hearing about, the things that we're doing in this meeting with our strategic plan to make sure that our efforts align with that plan. But we're continuing the implementation of to make that more clear. So Board Docs actually has which is the application where we run all of our meetings, that has some of those capabilities built in. Letitia showed me how she could do that. Showed me another district that does that. And she's looking into learning to adapt our use of Board Docs to accommodate that. So you'll be able to click in, let's say on the financial report, let's say, or particular pieces of it, you'd be able to click through in Board Docs, and that would link to the specific goal, and it has the metrics of that goal. That was for the next meeting, for me, I'd at least like to see, one, hopefully that'll be working to some extent on our for our next regular meeting in Board Docs. I also like to see the dashboarding, so to speak, of the data that we have in our strategic plan, and how I'd like to produce or have produced the formats of those reports. So if that's in Board Docs like that other school district does, where you can click through it and see where we are at each, say this effort relates to this piece of data, we can click through it and see it, that would be great. Also, if there's a consolidated dashboard where we can take a look at all of the metrics that we've enumerated in the strategic plan and see that in one place, and go through that, page by page and data by data to see our progress and to see if we're making the progress that we want to see. PV?
Thank you, President Nigro. I would like to see if we could continue the conversation about the ombudsperson and that role and what that looks like, whether we need to expand the policy or integrate other options. I think it's worth having it as a discussion point and potential action item for a future agenda. I would like to see what Superintendent Reichman and Assistant Superintendent Cooper have as far as findings during that meeting as well.
Thank you, PV. In terms of just to clarify, so you're proposing changes to the policy, or are we only focused on the subject of finding a specific resource?
Just more specifics, to have a discussion on which avenue we would like to pursue for a long-term permanent solution, whether that be a neutral third party like we're doing temporarily, or whether we want to have the discussion to develop contract requirements and expectations as a board, just to further the discussion on what our options are as we get some more exploration in the meantime. I think that the loss of Karen has hurt us more than we realize right now. I think that now that we have seen the unique needs of this person, the struggle will be to find someone with the qualifications. She has left some big shoes to fill.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing both then, because we certainly want an item where we talk about the search for the ombudsperson and the specific staffing that we would need. We could also have another item where we discuss potential changes to the policy if any of the board members would like that policy changed or amended in some way to expand or contract the role of the ombudsperson. Okay, are there other items for next time? No, okay. Hearing none, we're going to go to 901 action item adjournment, and before I entertain Lynn's motion to adjourn, I would like to thank all the media and all the staff for setting up this meeting in Sedona. They've done a great job. I don't know if you at home can see what they've done here, but it's there's quite a bit of material here to produce this meeting that all had to be, none of it was here natively. It all had to be brought up from our facilities and set up. And there's quite a production area over there with several staff members that are able to to produce this event. So I know this particular meeting, especially because it was not housed at one of our schools, it was not housed in Phoenix or Tucson, where we have a lot of this equipment that's here. It's available. We know what our bandwidth capabilities are. We know where our technology is. And to kind of move this up north was quite an undertaking. I understand that we're here for a few days setting up, and they've done a great job. So thank you, and everyone should, even though you don't see it in the broadcast, should be appreciative of our staff for that. So 901 is the adjournment. Has anyone moved to adjourn? Lynn?
Yes, this is my duty to move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you again so much for being here and for having our first in-person meeting since March of 2020. It's nice to see everyone in person, and we'll see you on August 12th, and then we'll see you on the next regular board meeting in September. Thank you.